Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, we are going to take a look at the for loop machinery that works behind the scenes. The machinery that we talked about in the previous video. And if you haven't watched the previous video, I would highly recommend to just go and watch it to get into the context, and you will be able to understand this video better. So let's continue with the video. I have taken the exact same example that as in the previous video. It has this employee record. It returns the employee record iterator when the employee record object is passed to the iter function. And this employee record iterator has this dunder next method. So this is entire, just to remind you, this is the iterator pattern. And this dunder next method fetches every item in the list and returns that, and maintaining its own state to know which index we are currently fetching and which index is to fetched next. It has its self.index, which is initialized to 0, and as in when the next keeps on dunder next executes, the state of the value of index changes and it points to the next value. And that's how it works. And the example that we saw in the previous video is exactly this one. So we try to fetch the iterator out of the employee record object, and then we try to loop over it and print all the names. Let's see what is the output of this program. What is the output of this code? So we print all the players in this for loop, right? But we also talked about that there is, because we are not doing any complex thing, just because this for loop is pretty abstracted from what is going on under the hood. So we'll just try to emulate or just try to implement a sample for loop machinery that works behind the scenes. So I'll just comment out this and let's try to build that. So one thing just to note that this dunder next method is invoked repeatedly to fetch the next item, and once it is invoked and the index is pointing to a value which is not in the range of that list. For example, it is we have a total 4 elements in the list, which means 0, 1, 2, 3, and once the value reaches 4, when the value of index is 4, and it tries to fetch that value, it will raise an index error exception, and then index error will be caught here in the dunder next method, and then it will eventually raise stop iteration exception. And this stop iteration exception is going to help us, or it's going to signal that we have to stop the for loop. Well, that's handled by the for loop machinery, so we have to take care about that. So let's try to implement the sample for loop machinery. I'm going to use while loop to implement that for loop machinery, because we have to invoke the dunder next repeatedly. So let's have a while loop which runs forever, and next you will understand what's going on. So just bear with me for just 2 minutes. I'm going to fetch the next item, and I'm going to use this next method that is a built-in method given next function, which is given by Python by default in its built-in library, and I'm going to pass iterator. And once the next returns me the item, I'm going to simply print it. So next item, I will print it here. So what happens now with this implementation? So I have a while loop which runs forever. And if it runs forever, which means it will always try to invoke this next. This next function is going to call this dunder next on the iterator, because this iterator is of type employee record. Just to make sure, if you have forgotten that, let me bring you in the context. If I print iterator, you will see that it will say that it is of type employee record iterator. So let me print that. Okay, let me comment this out. We'll see this. So let me print it. So if you see, I'm just printing this iterator, and this iterator says it is of type employee record iterator, and employee record iterator implements this dunder next. So when we pass this employee record iterator to the next function here in while loop, let me comment this out now. When we pass that iterator object in this next function, then it will call the corresponding dunder next method and try to fetch the next item. We are returning this next item here. If you see on line number 27, we are returning that, and that next item will come here and we'll simply print it. So now let's try to execute, and you see that we are getting this stop iteration, which is unhandled exception, and it is coming from line number 38. What is line number 38? 38 is where we call this next. Okay, what's the total output? So what is the entire thing that got printed? We have printed all the 4 players, which means for the first 4 times, for the first 4 iterations when our while loop ran, it actually got the 4 players. It printed them one by one. But for the 5th time, when it tried to execute this next, then this next when this dunder next was executed, it tried to fetch the 5th element, which is not there in the list. This would have raised an index error. Index error would have caught here. This it's handled here, and then eventually a stop iteration was raised, but that stop iteration is not handled. So what we are going to do is that obviously we need to handle that stop iteration, because it's because it is only coming because we have invoked next, but we haven't handled that. But if we were invoking next for index value which is out of the range. So let's try to handle that stop iteration. So except stop iteration, and then simply I can break this value. So I hope that should be it. That should be it. So let me run this again. And yes, so it gives the exact same output as we got in the for loop when we ran the for loop, which means Python translates your for loop to something similar to this, which takes care of invoking that dunder next method, and and handles the exception raised by that dunder next method, which is a stop iteration, and you don't have to worry about it because it's done behind the scenes. That's why this for loop looks so clean. You don't have to just the thing that we have implemented in probably 6 to 7 lines. It is just implemented here in 2 lines. So that's the beauty. That's how clean, and that's why this for loop looks so clean. So okay, this is fine. But one thing that I wanted to bring into the notice, bring into your bring to your attention is that I just want to get your attention to is that we don't have to explicitly get this iterator every time. I have already said in past that it will be like very specialized cases where you'll be invoking this iter function. So you can, I think, skip this, and instead of because you will be always calling the for loop, so you can, instead of it, you can simply use the iterable object, which is employee record object. Employee record is an iterable because it implements the dunder iter method. So you can simply create an object, the iterable object, and then simply loop over it, and that's going to give you this exact same result. If you see, we have printed all the 4 players, but that iter function is invoked in the for loop machinery, which means your for loop machinery is going to have something like uh, this. And now if you remove this, commenting this for loop, this is something which will be there exactly in the for loop machinery, which means it will also try to get your iterator out of your using this iter function. So if you run this, you get the exact same output. That's what goes on in the that's what goes on behind the scenes, behind the curtains. So if whether you write this for loop or whether you write this something similar to this, it will give you the same result, which means that your for loop is eventually translated into a piece of code which is working in functionality wise, works similar to this while loop. Okay, that's what I wanted to convey in this video, and I hope you liked it, you understood, you got benefited from it. And if you liked it, please do like, share, and subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you in the next one.